Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to Living the Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez. Let's begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to witness resolutely in order to build together with all people of goodwill the civilization of truth and love to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and lover of life. Amen. Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I have the great honor today of interviewing Dr. Martin Bednar. Martin Bednar, MD, PhD, is currently Vice President and Global Program Leader for the Alzheimer's and Parkinson's Disease Portfolio at Takeda Pharmaceuticals in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Martin was previously at Pfizer, Inc. He spent the majority of his time leading the clinical Alzheimer's disease and neuroinflammation portfolios. Martin has worked on drug therapies in the areas of stroke, traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's disease, schizophrenia, and hearing loss, targeting symptomatic, disease-modifying, and regenerative therapeutics. He was instrumental in the approval of Geodon for the treatment of schizophrenia. Martin obtained a combined MD PhD in cardiovascular pharmacology at New York Medical College. Following neurosurgery residency, Martin was an associate professor of neurosurgery at the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont, where both his clinical neurosurgical specialization and research focused on the surgical and medical treatment of cerebrovascular disease. His work assisted in the approval of T-PA for stroke. He served as a vice chair of surgery and section head of the surgical research laboratories at the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont. Martin has authored approximately 90 peer-reviewed publications and book chapters with topics ranging from mechanisms related to traumatic brain injury, clinical trial design for early Alzheimer's disease, neurorestoration, and stem cell strategies for stroke and other brain disorders. The emergence of Alzheimer's disease following surgery, therapeutics for hearing loss, design conducted for the first pharmacological interventional trial for age-related hearing loss. The role of cardiac QT interval in drug development and the relationship of healthcare professionals and the pharmaceutical industry. He holds a number of patents related to neurodegeneration and cardiovascular therapeutics and for anti-inflammatory therapeutic strategies. Martin has been active in apologetics, writing in lay magazines and newspapers ranging from the Wall Street Journal to Legatus magazine. He has also authored 3 children's picture books and enjoys speed skating and running in his leisure time. Wow. Dr. Bednar, it's an honor to have you on the program. I must say that we got in touch when he approached me years ago, looking to have me as a speaker for his local Legatus chapter. I can't imagine what you could learn from me with this resume, Dr. Bednar.
Well, we all learn from each other, so I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
So it's a testament to his modesty that I had no idea. I mean, I had an idea what you did, but the extent of what you did until I just got this resume a few minutes ago. Fantastic. What made you interested in neuroscience? What made you want to study it?
Well, it was just such an untapped area. It was an area of medicine and research that we knew the least about. So when I was in medical school quite a while ago now, we had very little understanding of brain function and or malfunction, what happened during disease processes. And so this seemed to be an area that would sort of keep me engaged for a lifetime. And
certainly so much material to go through, but you've gone through so much of it already. Oh my gosh, you've touched on many of the major chronic diseases, neuro diseases that we're struggling with as a culture. And I must say, still struggling quite a bit considering how many advances we've made in other diseases.
Right, we have a long way to go yet.
Yeah, we certainly do. And so many Americans which suffer from Alzheimer's. Do you have any stats?
Yes, there are over 5 million people in the United States that have the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, and more than 50 million worldwide. The greatest risk factor is age. So since the world in general and the U.S. population in particular is an aging population, these numbers without any therapeutics will continue to increase, and right now we're going to go into epidemic proportions if we don't develop therapies.
And Parkinson's, another epidemic, as you say, will increase because of the aging population.
Right. There we have over 1 million people in the United States with Parkinson's disease, and again, cures that are therapies that are helpful, but certainly are not cures. And we, as in many other drug companies, are very interested in developing newer and better therapies for both of these diseases.
Well, as you talk about this and the increasing incidence of these diseases, it reminds me of an article I read on Dr. Acosta, who is a research doctor from the University of Colorado, and he was working on the incidence of Alzheimer's with people who have Down syndrome, which I understand that as they age, almost everyone with Down syndrome develops Alzheimer's. His own daughter has Down syndrome, so the New York Times featured an article where Dr. Acosta is racing to find a cure for Alzheimer's, particularly in Down syndrome, because his daughter has Down syndrome. But the other race that they were talking about is the fact that we have very advanced technology for prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. Right now, we have these non-invasive prenatal testing, which can take place at 10 weeks using the mother's blood, which is counted to be 99% accurate. I don't know if it is. But anyway, so we can detect Down syndrome, and the great majority of American women, up to 68 to 90%, will abort before we have a cure for many of the diseases that they can suffer from, the secondary diseases. So that puts parents under great pressure to abort, and that's my particular interest in the field, having Charlie Down syndrome in the pro-life ministry, that we put so much effort on finding the disease, but we haven't the cure. And that's a very sad circumstance, because we may never get there if we present abortion as a cure to parents.
That's right.
And that's how it was presented to me in 2002. You had a chance to abort, you didn't. That's it. That's all we have. I'm like, what do you mean that's all we have? What kind of medical science is this?
Yeah, that's not medical.
Killing the patient, because they have the disease. And I'm not afraid to call Down syndrome disease. Of course it is. Many parents are offended by that. It doesn't mean we don't love our children. But I don't particularly love an illness which takes away my daughter's mental capacity and keeps her from communicating and then, integrating herself as fully as she would want to in society. My daughter is very, very much impaired. Down syndrome has a range of IQ of 60 points. So there are some people that are going to college with Down syndrome, but not everyone. And until we find some way to understand the mechanism of trisomy 21, we won't. But anyway, and also on the other end of the spectrum with euthanasia and assisted suicide. Now, assisted suicide is approved, I believe, in 6 states. I know it's Oregon, New Jersey, California. Do you know which states, Dr. Bednar?
I don't.
But it's growing, and it gets pushed every year. And one of the excuses that they use, and I've said it on the hearings in Connecticut, we defeated it, I believe it's 4 times now. I have to keep a scorecard. But it's hard because they bring out the suffering of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's patients. So there's a race to cure these illnesses so that they're not used as an excuse for terminating elderly patients either.
I agree.
And your work is incredibly important for that, as you must know. So what got you interested in apologetics as a sideline?
Well, when I finished my residency in neurosurgery, I realized I was quite well versed in the scientific aspect of what my career, and could quote lots of facts and figures and articles, but I disappointingly did not feel the same way about my religion, and I felt that it was time to step up and get to that same level. And so at that time, I became much more active, reading a lot of apologetic materials, Catholic doctrine, to more thoroughly immerse myself in the understanding of our Catholic faith. And the more I read, the more I wanted to read, the more I understood our faith, and the more I could sort of marry my expertise in science and now in religion, because most of the hot-button items in the Catholic religion have a scientific basis. There are very few that don't. For example, divorced and remarried couples doesn't, but almost all other aspects of controversy within the Catholic faith do. Embryonic stem cells, abortion, transgenderism, euthanasia, end of life. And these are all important issues for us that those without a medical degree probably don't have a deep understanding of. And many of us can be misled by the popular press or by people who want to move things in one direction or another. And so it's important for those of us who understand that intersection of science and religion to bring them together in a more full understanding. I look at it and I call it the religion and the science. I call it reliance. We're really combining religion and science.
Well, that's fascinating, because how many scientists have said publicly that being a scientist means that you're too smart to be religious? And I was able to do Dr. Peter Singer, who certainly is of that point of view.
Well,
and
unfortunately.
Pardon?
He certainly is, unfortunately.
Yeah, that seems to be the prevailing opinion, that if you understand science, then you obviously have no use for religion. What would you say to somebody who says that?
Well, I'd say that that's absolutely false. In fact, I would, some people ask me, how do you do this? And I said, well, some part of me says, I wish I could tell you how difficult it was and how many obstacles I had to overcome. But it's actually quite easy. I see no conflict whatsoever in being a strong intellectual scientist and having a devout Catholic faith. There is no sort of a conflict between the two of those, and I don't understand folks who want to say that there is. There are a number of us who belong to the Society of Catholic Scientists, where we share those points of view. Certainly, there's nothing within our Catholic faith that sort of denounces the importance of science, and the two are integral to each other.
And what would you say is one of the most important points at which they intersect?
Well, I think one of the most important points is about when human life begins. It begins at conception. Some people don't want to admit that. People that are pro-abortion.
They've actually tried to change the definition of conception. Am I right? Is that the ACOG that has actually altered the definition to fit popular opinion?
There are all sorts of strategies for that, but the bottom line is that at the point of conception, you're getting the mixing of 23 chromosomes from the husband and the wife, and forming a unique human being. That happens at conception.
And it usually happens in the
if that isn't the formation of a new human life, I haven't had anyone yet explain to me in any coherent manner when it does begin.
Of course not. Of course not. That's when they knew. Well, I think they try to define what a person is. I think that's like the next strategy.
Well, that's the argument now is we're not going to argue about the fact that this is a human life or not. Now we're going to argue when we should grant that person that
status, legal status of
the status of personhood.
Because then a person is due certain rights, and the primary among them is right to life. So if we can say that it's not a person
now, because they know that they can't argue that it's a human life, and so now it's like, well, now we'll just argue about when we're going to grant them personhood, when we're going to.
They move the goalposts.
The fact that they have
when
those
science
rights.
catches up with them, Dr. Bednar, they move the goalposts. Okay, we've got to change. We've got to change our terms. Dr. Alan Keyes appeared in Connecticut a few years ago, and he warned us. He said, the pro-life movement has relied on science in a good way for a long time. For example, ultrasonography showing us the humanity of the human being has made a lot of people pro-life. The actual fact of that you can see a heart beating and a person moving. And he says you're going to come to the point where the pro-abortion side doesn't care that that's a human being.
Right.
And then what do you do?
I think they're there already.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, that was a couple of years ago, and he was prophetic. It's definitely happened. They're like, yeah, so it's a human being, and I want to kill it. So what? So we've gone from the safe, legal, and rare euphemism to, yeah, it's a human being, but I'm going to kill it anyway because it's not a person. And so in many states now they've legalized abortion up to birth, which essentially it was legal up to birth because Roe versus Wade said the state could put limits. Planned Parenthood versus Casey, 1992, the Supreme Court decision, said that states could impose limits on abortion. However, there always was the medical necessity clause. And as you know, your fellow medical professionals are very liberal in giving out permission slips for abortion, saying that it was medically necessary, including stress on the mother. And, let's face it, being a mother is stressful.
Yes.
No matter how much you want that baby, it's stressful. So it's always stressful to give birth. There's no way around it. I mean, as beautiful as it is, it's a stress on the human body and spirit. There's no way. And yes, the women that I see in my pregnancy center where I am now are in terrible situations of stress. No one can deny that. What they don't want to say is that an abortion causes stress, that is a lifelong trauma that many, many millions of women around the world are hiding because they were told it was nothing and they're ashamed to bring it out. And that's one of the greatest misuses of so-called women's rights, of the term women's rights. Anyway, back to science. So you're saying that medical doctors who are honest can prove that the Catholic Church is right on many of life issues, that we stand with science.
Correct.
And there are people with agendas that are on the other side trying to twist science around. And we mentioned beginning of love. Also, we would talk about transgenderism. There's a whole new field that came out where science is being twisted around.
Right. Well, or is just not being able to be developed or used. To some extent, the liberal wing of society has gotten beyond the twisting of the science and just, as an abortion says, we don't care. We realize now that there's no argument about a human life being formed at conception. Now we're saying we just don't care. We're not going to admit that this person has personhood. And that's our new statement on it. And the same for other areas.
So they abandoned science and they went to legality. We're going to change their legal status because we're losing on the science front.
That's right.
And with transgenderism, again, we're talking about giving any child who says they want to be another sex, we're giving them rights even over their own parents.
That's right.
Johnny just made a casual statement about wanting to be a girl. Tomorrow he's going to want to be Superman.
Right.
It doesn't mean he has to undergo hormone therapy at whatever age.
The medical facts are that 80 to 90% of children who express these views later fully and comfortably understand, their identity as biological male or female. There is counseling that can help with this. But
many times the counseling is banned.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Now they've
gone beyond the science just to say we don't care. We don't care what the science says. We're going to impose these views, and not allow you to even bring science into the picture. At
even
the other
change
end,
your
you have
mind.
people,
So, yeah, even if the person changes their own mind, they set a momentum going that person might feel trapped. I don't know if I know some transgender people that have come back to their original biological sex, but there is a pressure.
If you look at people like Dr. Paul McHugh, who was head of OBGYN at Hopkins decades ago now, he started their clinic to...
Is that at Johns Hopkins?
I'm sorry?
Was that at Johns Hopkins?
Yes.
Yeah, and they stopped doing it. The surgeries, right?
They started doing it, and they carefully kept the data and said, what kind of outcomes do we have? How are people feeling years and decades later? And what he realized was that, this wasn't helping them psychologically. This didn't put them in a better place. And therefore, as you say, he stopped doing it and became an ardent supporter of therapies to help people understand their real identity based on biology.
Not based on an ideology. He did not have that ideology originally. The science led him to his belief, not the belief leading to the science, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, because we believe these people have rights to choose their gender, and that gender is fluid, and we have so-called gender theory, we want to manipulate the science or ignore the science and just go with that. And I know a young woman whose father left the family to marry a man, and now she's experiencing dysphoria, probably due to the relationship of her father and mother. And but she has so much pressure at school, so much positive feedback for what she's choosing to do. I think that she may not be thinking about what's best for herself. She's in a state of confusion, anger, all kinds of emotions. And I'm very sympathetic with that. I can't imagine how painful it is. But you're right. There's no one to warn her that this could lead to something that's going to cause more misery down the road. And it's not
there's a great group that's doing a lot of work in this area, the American College of Pediatrics, and they have a lot of strong support, and they provide a lot of scientific basis for what we believe scientifically is a way to proceed with people who have this level of confusion.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good to know. So the American College of Pediatrics, is that the one that most pediatricians belong to?
No, it's not. This is a splinter group that came into being decades ago. Primarily, the fraction started after Roe v. Wade, and sometime after that, this group broke off because their ideology just could not support abortion as being akin to health care.
And the American Academy of Pediatrics accepted abortion, am I right?
That's right. So everyone at one point was members of the American Academy of Pediatrics, but now those folks who fully support life from conception to natural death, that's the American College of Pediatricians.
Okay. And, there we go.
And that is the group that can back up their statements, chapter and verse. They really have sort of wed, the science with the faith, and so they have a lot of support from scientific basis. It's not just sort of simply an ideology, and I'm going to impose some thoughts on you. They have the basis, the scientific basis to support their contentions. They're a great group of individuals.
Well, that's good. So a parent that is having difficulty could go to the American, say it again,
The American College of Pediatrics, ACP.
Instead of the American Academy?
Yeah, not the AAP, the ACP, the American College of Pediatricians.
Very good. American College of Pediatricians. I'm going to write this down and put it on my website. Good to know, because I'm terrified for parents now. I was a homeschooler. I'm an educator myself, and because I had been subjected to social experiments in the 70s and was being pressured to abandon my Catholic faith, being told that it was the faith of oppressors and the faith of anti-science zealots and no. It actually gave me a very good education in public school because I had to double my research to counteract what my teachers were saying. But it gets tiring after a while. And I just said, so many of my classmates from Catholic families were nodding in agreement because they wanted good grades and it sounded reasonable, and who believes their parents anyway in the 70s, right? So I said, well, my kids are not going to have to go through that, at least until they're prepared. So I home educated them, but I do feel, especially now with the whole transgender, I'm really worried for parents that have children, and I've seen many of my daughter's classmates, I have 3 girls, being talked into being homosexual when I don't believe that was their original intent. I think it's just a trend. And it's just like promiscuity is a trend, and all these things are life destroying, as we see here in the pregnancy center. We see the wreckage of human life that happens from these ideologies. By the way, there's also a pro-life OBGYN group.
Yes.
If you happen to be a physician listening to this, the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. I have attended one of their conferences. About half the people who attend their conferences are not medical professionals, not doctors, not MDs or OBGYNs. They are, like me, pregnancy center directors, nurses, and people that want to work in that field, in the pro-life field. But they give fantastic conferences. I believe they're all over the country now. I attended one in D.C. with my daughters. Most of my daughters are RNs with their nursing professor. And he brought a group down from Franciscan University where my daughter sent. And fantastic organization. So professionals are getting together, medical professionals, and fighting this culture of death that's pervading their field.
And they're combining forces, too. It's not like this OBGYN group that you mentioned and the American College of Pediatricians are strangers to each other. They're not. In fact, they have a combined conference once a year. Yes,
nice.
They do. And usually early on in the first quarter of the year, they get together, they exchange ideas, share values, and so these are not sort of forces just out there.
Oh no, we have
fighting
to
it alone. They're fully understanding each other's mission.
March 27th, 2020, in Trinity International University, Deerfield, Illinois, they are going to have a joint conference. There we go. Yeah.
Right.
So if anyone's interested in the medical field, American College of Pediatricians, both OBGYNs, APLOG, are joining forces next March in 2020 at Trinity International University, Deerfield, Illinois. So that's a conference you may be interested in. Like I said, I am no ways a medical professional, and I found it very interesting, the conference that I attended. I learned a lot, and I met some incredible people in the field, including one I had written about, Dr. Jim Patty Baggett from Los Angeles, an OBGYN, who is 100% pro-life, and he also does anecdotal research. I suppose you can't do clinical research on pregnant women expecting children with Down syndrome, but he's had some amazing results giving B vitamins voluntarily to mothers expecting children with a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. He had some amazing films of what these young babies were able to accomplish, including an infant. I forget how old. I think about 3 months. He was doing the army crawl in the crib, which for Down syndrome is incredible strength. They're usually very low muscle tone. And another, I believe it was 2-year-old that was reading. And that's incredible for any 2-year-old, but a 2-year-old with Down syndrome, it's unbelievable. So he's getting some amazing results. And that's what, I wish doctors would focus on with prenatal testing. Oh, you have Down syndrome. Well, what can we do to improve our outcome? I mean, that's what Dr. Jerome Lejeune, who discovered the cause of Down syndrome, discovered trisomy 21 did. He said, let's improve our outcomes. Let's improve their lives. Not eliminate their lives, but unfortunately his research of discovering karyotyping and what the karyotype of Down syndrome looks like was used to search and destroy, to his great sorrow. It was the greatest regret of his life. Are you familiar with Dr. Jerome Lejeune?
Yes, I am, yes.
Yeah, and real tragedy that a good Catholic man and another good Catholic doctor from New Zealand who developed the amnio technique, that those two techniques were put together early, really, back in the 60s, right after they were discovered, to eliminate up to 90% of unborn babies diagnosed with Down syndrome. Instead of saying, what can we do to make their lives better? Now, now that my daughter's been born, now that there's an internet, a lot of us parents of children with Down syndrome, as you know, have united and are pushing. We created new research foundations, and we're doing wonderful progress in research but we're still chasing the statistic of the high abortion rate. Because, when people receive that diagnosis, very often they're not given a good idea of what life is like with Down syndrome, what it can be like.
Right.
And they're discouraged, and they feel alone, and they feel hopeless. That's why I refused prenatal testing for anomalies. For that reason, I was 39, and I knew living in New York, the pressure would be really high. And having had enough pressure growing up in my life to do the wrong thing, I said, this one I'll pass. I'll just take what God gives me. And somehow he thought I was worthy of raising this beautiful young lady with Down syndrome. So, well, thank you. And so you discovered my book somewhere along the line, Dr. Bednar. Is that true?
Yes, I did. It's with the apologetics that I work on. One of the important issues, as you say, is the pro-life movement, and I was researching people in our area, in the Connecticut area, and came across your book and the wonderful title. The title is a stunner. It really refocuses, what we're thinking about here. A special mother is born. And just giving the vignettes from all of these individuals, and I'm sure you publishing this book and having it out there has given strength to countless other individuals, mothers, and certainly well beyond mothers and mothers to be. It's just a wonderful book that basically should be required reading for everybody to sort of ground them and have them have a taste of the sanctity of life and the importance. The stories in there are just incredible.
Thank you so much. And I didn't write most of it, as you know. It's 33 stories from Catholic parents, mostly women, as the title suggests, but a couple of men I just couldn't resist. Dr. Coffin's beautiful story and Dr. Embellis's story. So, their stories speak for themselves, that they all went through a shock at finding out that their child was less than perfect. No one expects this going in. I had a couple of parents that were adoptive, and I give them great credit. If God had asked my permission, my answer would have been an emphatic no, I'm not up for it. But the point of a special mother is born is that he rebuilds us to mother and father these children if we give him permission. And it happens day by day by day. And I am a much better person than I was 17 years ago. And no, it wasn't by choice. But in my case, it was kicking and screaming. But the beauty of our faith is that whatever God demands of us, he gives us the strength to do. We just got to keep the pipeline open.
That's right.
And so here you are in a beautiful science field where you're possibly finding incredible cures. I noticed that you found a treatment for schizophrenia, which is also a great area of suffering for many families and patients in this country. And but in the meantime, if we were to live our faith fully and to understand it as fully as we should, that we would be spared a lot of the pain and poor decisions that we make. And to that effect, I'm going to ask you to talk about your role in Legatus. Explain what Legatus is.
Yes. Well, Legatus is a Catholic business group, organization, and Legatus, the word Legatus itself is Latin for ambassador. So Legatus means that the individuals that are in its membership are ambassadors for Christ in the marketplace. We are business people, entrepreneurs, doctors, lawyers, just from every walk of life who want to share their faith with other people to network, get more ideas, become energized, and bring back all of their learnings and blessings back into their own workplace, into their own sphere of influence within their organization and beyond. And so there are roughly, I guess, about 90 chapters now, primarily in the U.S., a few in Canada. And it's sort of the brainchild of Tom Monahan. Tom Monahan has had quite the life. He was initially into the pizza industry. He was the founder of Domino's Pizza. Mm-hmm. He sold the franchise and then bought the Detroit Tigers, the Major League Baseball team. Mm-hmm. Ultimately sold that and has basically given almost all of his fortune into creating Ave Maria University in Ave Maria, Florida, a Catholic university, and which he continues to be very actively engaged in it. But beyond that, Tom Monahan had, in one of his meetings with St. Pope John Paul II back in '87, after one of his meetings with him, had an inspiration to start this Catholic business group. And so he did. And so it's been around now for over 30 years and has steadily grown in numbers and chapters, but yet, still the same mission, of spiritual growth, of networking, of bringing the message of being an ambassador for Christ back to the marketplace, the areas in which you work. I happened to meet Tom Monahan for the first time quite by chance, well before I had joined Legatus in Rome's airport, Fiumicino Airport. We had both attended the beatification of John Paul II at the time. And,
really?
And we were just standing on a very long and intolerably long line for what ultimately was more than an hour, and we were just standing next to each other, and we just started chatting. And at one point he had asked me what I did, and I said, "Well, what do you do?" And because we didn't know each other, and he said, "Well, I also used to own a pizza business, but now I head up a university." And I said, "Well, you're Tom Monahan." There's only one person in the world that I knew that those two pieces of information could intersect. And he's like, "Oh,
right,
you know me?"
Right.
And I was like, "Well, yes, I know of you." And we had a wonderful conversation. And then a few years later, I became acquainted with his brainchild, Legatus, and joined the Providence, Rhode Island chapter.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's fantastic. It's wonderful ways, as Pope St. John Paul was always interested in getting the gospel into the far corners of the world, and sometimes the business world seems very far from the gospel. And it certainly needs to be baptized as everything in the marketplace does. I mean, that is our role as laymen and women to bring the entire world to Christ, even the business world. I'd say it laughingly, because sometimes, again, business people think that the gospel interferes with what they do. And Tom Monahan is proof that you don't have to be poor because you're a Christian. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't be successful.
Well, that's right. We have a lot of folks out there these days, unfortunately, that although they'll still allow you to go to church, they don't want you to take it outside the walls of the church. They don't want you to take that message of Christ's love out into the
it's considered rude, right,
society.
to bring up religion in certain circles, isn't it? Remember, it used to be politics, sex, and religion, and sex is definitely not off the table anymore. Politics seems to be more prevalent, causing a lot of polarity, and religion is probably still the only forbidden topic.
Right.
In polite society, but the Legatus attempts to bring it in, and I think that's wonderful that it's being done, and also for business leaders to come to connect with people like me who have no business acumen whatsoever, but who do need support in our ministries and what we do, because we can't rely on the institutional church as much as we used to. The church is going through a crisis right now. I don't think we need to describe it to anyone. I think they know, which is causing great financial losses. So the church isn't the financial powerhouse it used to be. It won't be soon.
Well, as one pastor, I'll quote, has said, that the Catholic Church is holy. Its members are not. This goes back to the earliest days, that every one of us are sinners, but we still believe in Jesus Christ and his presence in the world over 2,000 years ago, and what he died for us. That's right. That goes on regardless of the individuals who enter those doors of the church.
That's right.
All of us are sinners, and that's exactly why we're there. Not because
it's proof that God can work with anybody. If he could work with the 12 fishermen and tax collectors and one betraying our Lord, and then start an institution which is still alive and thriving in 2000. It's proof that it was God's will all along, and that we don't need to worry about it. Pray for it, certainly, and support it as much as we can, but there's no need for fear. Be not afraid is one of my favorite phrases. It was the original name for the book, and then Father Benedict Rochelle was very enthusiastic about this project. Unfortunately, he had a stroke and wasn't able to write the foreword. He had offered to. And his secretary said to me, you need another name for that book. And so I thought about it, and I said, A Special Mother is Born is what happened to me. I was already a mother of two when I had my daughter Christina, but I was reborn. So we would like the entirety of society to be reborn into what, as Christ called us, you must be born again. You must be reborn through the sacraments, through the grace of God in the church. But we also have to say yes to it every day. Even if we were baptized, sometimes we let that slide and we get lazy and we entertain ourselves, and we're not like Dr. Bednar here who says, oh, okay, I'm very well versed in medicine, now I need to learn my faith. I mean, how many of us say that and actually follow through with the spiritual reading? I give you a lot of credit for wanting to be as well versed in your faith as you are in medicine, and that's saying something considering your resume. I want to, before we come to the end of our show, and time has been flying by, I'd like to talk about children's books. I didn't know you were an author as well until today. You're still not. What are your children's books? What's their names?
There are three. It's sort of a trilogy where the main character is it's a real life story about an abandoned kitty that my wife and I took in. Called we named him Sandy. At first, we didn't know if he was male or female. He turned out to be a neutered male who was abandoned, adult male cat. But his coat was sandy colored, and we said, all right, well that would work either way, so we'll name him Sandy.
Right,
Sandy. And so we befriended him, and he was a completely emaciated kitty. As an adult, only weighed about half the weight of an adult cat, about 5 pounds. And
wow.
And we found out that he, as hungry as he was and as starved as he was, he couldn't eat because he had a very bad mouth infection. And it's a certain type of bacteria that gets into the bones, into the teeth, into the jawbone. And we actually felt so bad for this kitty. We found a doctor, a veterinarian who would operate on Sandy, and we gave up a ski vacation and had Sandy operated on instead. And he did indeed cure the infection, but Sandy woke up unable to walk or see after a 4 or 5 hour surgery. The infection was cured, but he couldn't walk or see, and we were beside ourselves thinking, we thought we'd done everything right and how wrong things could go. But for us, it was sort of a time to say, it's a challenge, it's an opportunity here. It's just not sort of the end. And I was working on some new medications that might help new brain cells grow after a stroke, which is what Sandy had. And so we gave Sandy the medicines, and he was the first animal in the world to actually receive the combination, and he actually got better. Whether or not it was due to the medicines, who knows? But the point is that we used this experience with a nephew of ours to say, let's help Sandy, let's rehabilitate him, let's get him up and walking, and he was game for that, and so we were able to get Sandy back to almost where he was preoperatively, able to walk and able to see, and he lived another 7 years after that.
My goodness, that's quite a story.
So the first story is Sandy's dream, because it's sort of a double entendre. The first book was Sandy's vision, which was a double entendre of his inability to see, but then be able to see again, but also his vision of how we should conduct our lives. All three books each one of them has a separate, distinct, but important message for, I would say, kids, but also people of all ages. And the first one is to persevere in the face of adversity. We live in a throwaway culture. When things get difficult, we just want to give up and move on.
That's right.
And when things are important, though, you have to stick with them. So this was a message that we taught our nephew, that let's persevere here. This is important. Let's stick with it. Don't give up. And he didn't, and we didn't, and Sandy didn't. And so it was a lesson that as Sandy got better, he in turn taught his fellow cousins who wanted to know more about Sandy and what happened. So that was Sandy's vision. The second book, Sandy's Dream, was to teach children, and again, adults of all ages, to dream the most important dream of all, of helping other people. And the final book was Sandy's Gift, and that's to encourage kids to come out of their e-worlds and interact with their family and friends. It's not a sacrifice, it's actually a reward. The gift of time that we give each other. So each one of these uses Sandy as sort of the main figure to teach us each of these lessons. Persevere in the face of adversity, to dream the noblest dream of all, of helping other people, and to give the gift of time to each other. That's the most important gift we can do.
Very important lessons nowadays, absolutely. And I think it's ironic. This happens to me a lot. Today happens to be Empty the Shelter Day. I haven't fostered cats, but I've rescued many. And I feel so bad for those that are shut up in shelters. And just think of all you did for Sandy. Oh, my goodness. I don't think a cat has ever gotten such expert medical care.
Well, we've rescued other cats. We now have one named Clarence, who was found in an abandoned warehouse in Rhode Island and had already lost one eye, maybe 6 or 8 months old. And we named him Clarence after the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, I was wondering, he's an angel, right?
Stewart, Donna Reed. It was one of my favorite movies of all time. And we named him Clarence because we said, you know what? You're going to have a wonderful life. So we took him in, and it's been about 4 years now with Clarence and 2 other kitties that we have. And he has indeed had a wonderful life.
Oh, sure. He's very lucky you found him, that's for sure. That's beautiful. So you're involved in many ways in bringing the culture of life to the world, and from the medical profession, from leadership and businessmen, and also with writing. And tell me a little bit about your 90-plus article. Any that the layman would be interested in reading that we could understand?
Well,
I'm interested in many things I can't understand.
Yeah. Well, most of them are written for a technical scientific population in scientific journals. Initially, a lot of them were written about stroke and traumatic brain injury. My first career, I was a practicing board-certified neurosurgeon, and that's what I focused on a lot was traumatic brain injury, stroke, medical surgical therapies. And then sort of a second career, now focused more on Alzheimer's disease, related dementias, Parkinson's disease. And so there's sort of an evolution of articles that go more towards that aspect of medical science over the last decade or two. So they are, fairly technical because that's the audience that they're written for.
Sure.
The articles in the newspapers are less technical, but also bring in the science. I'm thinking maybe there's a third career that really focuses on again bringing these two together in a more comprehensive way.
I see a
book, religion and the science.
I see a book, A Layman's Guide Uniting the Faith and Science. There needs to be more written about that. I review books, and I see a lot of books go by my desk, and I don't see anything in that because you are so busy in the medical field, and it's a good thing that you are. You're doing wonderful work. But when you have free time from saving cats and cycling and skating and saving Alzheimer's patients, I wish you would. I wish you would help us unite the two. There was an Italian lecture I attended. I can't say how much I understood, but I love the title, Tra Scienza a Fede, Through Science to Faith. And you can steal it for title. I'm sure they won't mind. It was actually scientific testimony of the visionaries of Medjugorje, and I happened to be in Florence at the time. And whatever little I understood was that we can use science to some degree, and at one point faith takes over. But there's not necessarily a conflict. And we know that many scientific method and many great scientists were devout Catholics, especially among the Jesuits, who are known for their astronomy, developing astronomy. And Dr. Jérôme Lejeune, whom I hope will be recognized as a saint one day, because that man suffered tremendously for his pro-life stance in France in the 1960s. His entire career was almost destroyed by his pro-life view. He was an activist as well. But it came from, realizing that he had helped bring Down syndrome into the realm of prenatal testing, and that was leading to abortion, and that just broke his heart.
Well, what you say is so important, that there's such, as Fulton Sheen once put it, there aren't really many people who hate Catholics. There are a lot of people who hate what they think Catholicism is. And that's so important. For example, there are a lot of misconceptions out there that, for example, that being Catholic means you're being anti-science, that the Catholic faith and its leaders have not supported it. But as you say, here are people out there who are pro-life. Another Jesuit was an astronomer who conceived of the Big Bang Theory, of how the universe started.
That's right.
And, the fact that you do or you don't believe in the Big Bang Theory, if it did, it still requires some omnipotent being to start this all in process. It has to start somewhere. So one does not preclude the other. There's plenty of room for that intersection of science and religion.
That's right. And actually, Ben Stein did a funny movie called Expelled on Intelligence Allowed. I highly recommend it. It's funny, but it's not. He goes to many Nobel laureate scientists, and he asks them what was the origin of the world. And he gives this funny look to the camera when they come up with these outlandish answers. And the funniest one that I remember is he said, aliens came to Earth and planted human seeds. It was mankind, it wasn't creation. And he looked at the cover, you've got to be kidding. And this scientist believes this theory with all his heart. But it's a belief, isn't it? It's not, no one can prove where mankind came from. You can only develop theories. But sometimes the belief in a world which doesn't include a supreme being is more ardently held than the Catholic beliefs that we profess.
Well, I love Einstein's quote at one point where he said, "Science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind."
Very good. Very good. So we prop up one another, and we help understand. We understand a little bit more of God from either side. They liken it to climbing up a mountain, where God is on either side. Right? The theologians are coming up one side, and the scientists are coming up the other, and they meet themselves at God, meet one another at the same place. And I appreciate your work in that field. And please write my book someday. You were talking particularly about the life issues and how science and religion, especially the Catholic faith, has been right on those issues. I've been reading a reader on Humanity was right, a second edition of the book, because last year was the 50th anniversary. And it just makes me shake my head at how much misery the human race has been through in the past 50 years because of contraception. And it sounds so anti-scientific to say that, because it's become a staple part of human expectations, right, to contracept. And yet, so much of the misery that we've put ourselves through, and I'm not just talking about unplanned pregnancies or abortion, but breakdown of family life. I mean, we may probably not be talking about transgenderism now if we hadn't incorporated an expectation of contraception into our relationships. We would understand male and female, he created them, and what a beautiful thing John Paul described in his theology of the body, that being a woman is not just a genetic condition for me. I'm a woman in my soul, and that's a beautiful thing. And I don't want to be anything but a woman because I know my dignity. But I think most human beings out there, and Catholics, unfortunately, don't understand that dignity. Don't understand how beautifully and perfectly made they are. And as a scientist, you can appreciate that. I mean, you know how complex the brain is.
Yes.
And the human organism is. And, I mean, that's got to create as much wonder as an astronomer looking to a telescope, a microscope, right? Because of the incredible construction and the interaction of so many systems that no way this could have happened by chance.
Right. I mean, there's actually mathematical formulas have been done, and the chances that things just happened is an absolutely ridiculous number, so large it would take you centuries to even write it out.
Just to write out the probability.
One in so many. Yes. Thank you, and God bless you for all that you do.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.